Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to NABOR. My name's Gerald Lefebvre, and I am the 2021 chair. And my first introduction is Corey, our new president.
Yay!
So welcome. How is everyone this morning?
This morning?
It's still morning in my eyes.
Oh.
Sorry. This whole day's been really long. Yeah. Good to see all of you. All right, so what's the best burger so far? Anybody have the donut burger? No? Okay. All right, just checking. I might go out and get a donut burger. All right, well, so good to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. And on behalf of the board of directors and everyone here at NABOR, wanted to welcome you and hope that you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the format tonight is we're going to have people come up that are professionals in their respective areas, and they're going to speak for 2 to 3 minutes about different sectors of the commercial market. And then at the end, we're going to have an open session where you can talk about wants and needs. So the first person that we're going to have up is Rob Carroll from IPC, and he's going to talk about the office market.
Hello everyone, my name is Rob. I'm with IPC. Chip asked me to give you a very short briefing on what I think the office market's doing, so I plan to keep it pretty brief. In general, I would say that the office market's pretty strong right now. Some of the major listings we have, some of the bigger A buildings have seen really positive absorption. It's interesting, I think that there was a flight during the last turn to Bonita and some of the markets where there was cheap rents, and those markets have kind of strengthened, and the rents have kind of gotten to a place where the companies that want to be back in Collier are kind of coming back as they go. There's certainly been a lot of musical chairs, so I haven't seen a ton of new companies, but still it feels like positive population or positive absorption. The biggest thing is really the residential market and what's going on there. And so, I mean, commercial just follows residential. It's very simple down here. And, with what's going on down here, I think the interesting thing seems to be, we've always been very Midwestern. And the influx from the Northeast, I mean, talking to people from New York, New Jersey, even California, states that we don't normally talk to a lot of people from, they're kind of coming from everywhere. So that's a little bit different for sure. And the demographics a little bit different. It's a little bit younger, and they're coming to, not retire, they're coming to bring their business. So there's, there was certainly the COVID reaction, which was a downsize, although it didn't affect everybody the same. Some people, were doing great, and there were some companies that were expanding, but I would say on average, 2 out of 3 were contracting somewhat. Some, by quite a lot. I think that, the national trend is going to mirror down here. I think those that were talking about massive contractions and the work from home, I don't think that's going to be a lasting trend. I think that nationally, Wall Street's pushing people to get back in the office. They're realizing that people are just more efficient. People are made to be at work. And if you got kids, I mean, it just doesn't work. So I think in general, that's going to be a short-term thing. I think that the positive population growth is going to backfill for some of the vacancy that we did create. But in general, the rates remain pretty strong. We got back 100,000 square feet of space in the Fifth Third building I lease at 999 Vanderbilt. And it was an early buyout with Fifth Third, and it was just an incredible amount of vacancy that was created. And I'll tell you, since COVID, I've probably done 9 leases in that building, and it's some expansion, but we're doing turnkey deliveries, and that's big. So I think that we're getting the rent that we want, but it's a lot of investment in the space. I think if you're delivering quality, people are finding it. Amenities are huge right now. Trying to set ourselves apart as far as what we can provide. So all of that kind of comes into play. But in general, the B and the C market seems to be pretty stable. I can't say I've done a ton of leasing in that realm. It's really most of the activity that I've been involved in was A. So I think that maybe what I'm seeing is A, but I think that in general it's probably pretty stable throughout. Locally, it seems to be that the tenants here are in the office. You know, most of the businesses I see that where the tenants are still out are the bigger corporations where they have a corporate policy. I think maybe Oracle, you know, I don't know exactly what's going on with some of them, but there's other businesses that I'm aware of where, you know, they're just not in the office, and they seem to be kind of national type companies. So locally, you know, people are mostly back to work down here, it feels like it. And I mentioned, you know, we saw the full gamut. It was kind of all over the board. There was a bunch of companies that actually did end up expanding, but mostly it was probably in general retraction. Small offices in high demand, 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. That's, you know, as much as you have for that, it's gone. If you have less than that, they'd love to have less. Single office, 400 square feet, 700 square feet, you can't find it. And then lastly, I think that the office condo market, I think is going to have a run. You know, it's been recovering, I would say, for some time. I think there's been several sales recently that have broken records as far as we had a ceiling set at $320 a square foot. We saw some sales at $350, $360. There was one in the Galleria that was $400 plus. I've got one under contract that'll sell at $615 next month. So, you know, there's going to be some big numbers that are out there, and I think the cost of funds is really the driver there. I mean, you do the numbers, and if you've got the downstroke, your debt service mirrors your rent, so why wouldn't you do it? So I think as long as the interest rates stay low, that you're going to see, you know, a run there. And there's been others, like I know Bill Clone's had a pretty good deal of success in buildings converting to condo. And I think that, again, I think that with the cost of funds, I think people in this town can generally afford it, and I think that they'd rather control their own destiny. So that's it. And, you know, the other thing I think to remember is, you know, Naples is an outlier. You know, I talked to others in Tampa and Miami, and it's not like that elsewhere. So, you know, I think that we're just experiencing our own little bubble environment, and that's, you know, I think we'll probably be a benefactor from all of this, and probably just, you know, pinch yourself for it. But that's it. Anybody have any questions? No? Thank you.
Next person to come up to speak is on industrial, Wes Kunkel from Kunkel Realty.
Full disclosure, I was just asked to do this about 5 minutes ago, so I don't have anything prepared. Yeah. But basically, the industrial part of the commercial market right now is kind of the shining star, as we all know. But also, you know, Naples is, where'd you go? Said, you know, we're kind of a little world down here, and we don't have a lot of industrial space down here. We basically have the two industrial parks, the one off Pine Ridge Road right over here, and then we got the one across from the airport there. So, but yeah, the spaces, they're hot. I mean, we're at a vacancy rate that's really low. These 2,000 square foot spaces, we get phone calls daily on that stuff. It's tough to find. The big stuff, as you see, the Benderson property that's out there on 951, well, Collier Boulevard. You can tell I've been here for a while, but it's Collier Boulevard now in Davis. You know, the whole facade's been redone on that. That's, you know, I don't know if anybody knows. I've heard rumors that Amazon's taking part of that for their delivery services or so I mean, we're starting to grow. So I don't have a lot prepared, except for it's tough out there as far as finding a good space. So anybody got any questions? What's that? Yeah.
Next up is talk a little bit about COVID, and he's more a property management side. Robert Morgan from Morgan Property.
Can you hear me? Yep. All right. So I was going to talk about some legal aspects, but since the topic is COVID, we can talk about how COVID is. Oh, that doesn't matter. How COVID affected a lot of the tenants here in Collier County. So when things hit hard in March, many tenants, they could not. They came first to the landlord and said, "Hey, what are you going to do for me?" And the landlord sat back and said, "Hey, look to the government. The government's your first stop." Because the landlord, at that time, they weren't getting help from all the mortgage companies, and they were sitting back and saying, let the tenant first and go, and that's when PPP came out. The PPP a lot of the tenants started getting in April, and they already hadn't paid March's rent. So in April, it's when we started to see an influx of rent coming in and covering the past due rent. But that was really only for a coverage of about 8 weeks. So then after that 8 weeks, it started to hit again. The worst places I saw it being affected was on Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue, you had mostly retail that I was dealing with, and you didn't have your European tourists coming at the time. You didn't have a lot of the other people who were up north staying. So it made it very difficult for them. And they'd already blown through their PPP money. And the PPP money was based on really three things. It was 8 weeks of rent, payroll, and utilities. If you owned it, you could be some of the interest as well. So a lot of the landlords said, hey, let's try to make, lemon out of lemonade, or make lemonade out of lemonades, excuse me. So I had one landlord who goes, listen, we have tenants whose leases are rolling over, like in the next 12 months, 20 months. They said, let's go in and give them free rent to extend their leases. He goes, they're never going to pay this. They're going to be so deep in the hole, it'll be forever. So I don't call them my smart landlords, but my landlords who thought way down the road, they went, let's do this. So they were given 3 months of free rent, extending at least 5 years. It builds their rent roll. If they ever wanted to sell it, gosh, the cap rates and everything, it helps a great deal. Other landlords, they said, hey, we're going to take April's rent, we're going to defer it. Just pay it by the end of the year. That's when we were hoping that, hey, there might be a cure to this, there might be something else that comes along, we might see lower rates in reference to people being infected. Unfortunately, we really didn't see that yet. So I have a lot of landlords right now that still have a lot of past due rent that are still sitting on the books. But if I went, or if they went right now and said, hey, we're going to force you to pay it, which a lot of nationals, well, not national, a lot of large, big shopping centers, they did. I know some shopping centers that as soon as COVID started, they said, you're going to pay your rent or else. Well, I really don't know how they're doing now, but it's some of the nationals, but I deal with a lot of the local mom and pops, and luckily a lot of the mom and pops, they did well because they were supported by the community. A lot of the restaurants, I mean, they're still full. I mean, it says a lot about for the community, and it says a lot about the landlords, because the landlords were willing to help these small businesses until they could come back. Unfortunately, the ones that are hit the worst were your hair salons, nail salons, and the gyms, and those are the ones we had to help out the most. Fifth Avenue, some of my landlords, they're thinking about dropping rates 20% just to try to make it through all this and doing short-term leases and extending these people out, because I see that being the toughest spot right now. If we get the vaccine, that's going to help. The one other thing that's helping a great deal for these tenants is that all these people, as Rob was saying, they're coming up from the Northeast as well as the Midwest. They aren't going to go back. The ones I'm talking to, they're staying here through Christmas, all the way through Easter. So that's going to help a lot of your retailers, your restaurants. And we're open here compared to other states up north. So hopefully with the possibility of having the vaccine, and there's a second round of PPP money coming. There's also the CARES Act for Collier County. We have some tenants who've gotten that as well, which I think that's a short-term loan, but at a great rate. So things look more positive, I see, here down in southeast Florida or southwest Florida than a lot of other parts of the country. Any questions? Any tenants of mine? Yes.
Do we see any second round of landlords giving breaks and cuts?
I think that, well, the ones I'm talking to right now, the tenants who owe still past due money, a lot of it's from 1 month's rent. And they're saying, let's see what's going to happen through the season, because a lot of those that we said, hey, here's a 1 month's rent, please pay it off by the end of the year. That's when we were hoping that we were going to have a season that's really strong. It's here, but it's not really strong. You still see, reduced rates in restaurants and in shopping and stuff like that. Online is just killing your local, businesses. The retailers, So hey, go support one of your retailers, you know, this Christmas, no matter what it is, just a little bit. But I think there's a wait and see. One's the vaccine. Two is the second round of PPP money, which I'm sure all of you are seeing all over the news, you know, who's fighting back for what. And I just wish to God the PPP, or it's not really the PPP money, I wish the stimulus package was really just for helping the people who need it versus every other thing in the world. It's like, well, that's just my political standpoint on that. You know, just keep it to helping the people and get through this versus helping everyone's private project, you know? So it's really a wait and see, Chip. Yes, sir.
See the government jumping in and doing any forgiveness on that first round of the PPP loan?
They already have, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, they've already been given forgiveness on that. When well, I've talked to some people. They applied, probably 5-6 weeks ago, and it was a pretty quick process. And it also, how quick the process is what I saw and heard is how much money you got in PPP. 50,000 and less. I won't say it's a rubber stamp, but it went pretty quickly. As long as you could prove that you paid on the items that were in those categories, which is again, you know, payroll, rent, and you know, utilities and stuff like that. It got approved pretty quickly. But some of the people who got, as you read the newspapers, they got millions and their payroll was maybe $50,000. Yeah, well, hopefully someone's gonna be watching them and that money will go to the people who really need it. Yes, ma'am.
Any major tenant a possibility to fill the Nordstrom store in Waterside?
That'd be a question for Rob Carroll. Anyone in Nordstrom's, Rob? You have a tent to go in there?
I'm sworn to secrecy on that, sir.
Okay. Did you like shopping there? Yeah. Okay. Good shoes, huh? Anybody else? Like, who's going to win the game this weekend? The Gators or LSU? No? Thank y'all.
Next up is Pete Emty. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Emity, thank you. From EECON Construction. He's talked a little bit about construction, hopefully construction costs.
Thanks for having me here. Chip asked me to talk about some of the challenges that we face as contractors here. My company, we do about a 60% split, 60% commercial and 40% residential, new construction and a lot of renovation work. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. Biggest challenges for us, quite believe it or not, is still permitting, depending on where we're at. Meaning the process is a relatively tedious process, whether it be City of Naples, Cuyahoga County. I think Bonita Springs is probably the easiest for us, and it's just checking all the boxes that they need checked. And it seems like every week or every time we submit a building permit, there's something else that they need from us. So that's one of our challenges. Some of the other challenges, the subcontractor market, I'm sure as you guys know, and we're stretched. And fortunately, we rely on relationships with guys that we've been working with through the hard times 10, 12 years ago. And now those of us that made it are obviously doing very well. So we rely a lot on those relationships to pull off the projects that we're working and get them done as quickly and successfully as we can. As far as material costs, just in the last 60 days, I've received letters from several different sub-trades or suppliers, if you will. Steel, we're looking at 7 to 10% increases at the beginning of the year. Drywall, 10 to 15, maybe 20%, believe it or not. Steel framing. Wood doors is incredible. We had a project delayed 6 weeks on a wood door order, believe it or not. So we have to stay as far ahead of that as we can in order to get this stuff on our schedules when we need them. So those are our challenges. We're seeing it with windows, seeing it with structural steel as well, pre-engineered metal buildings, all that type of work. So it's just a matter of trying to stay as far ahead of it as possible. So and communicating with our clients our challenges as we try to get these projects built for them. Fortunately for us, COVID did not really have a major effect on our business, thankfully. I think we had one project that was delayed. It was a relatively small project that was delayed. Other than that, COVID has not had a real major effect on us. Everybody wants to know, what does everything cost per square foot? What's it cost per square foot? So I pulled some stats from a few projects that we've done over the past, particularly commercial. Medical is a difficult one. Medical office condo or build-outs of medical office condos, it's really difficult because it just depends on what you need. And particularly when you're looking at medical, it's, okay, well, how much plumbing are we going to have to do? Are we taking a space that has none and adding, you know, an exam room or 15 exam rooms, or, you know, and then what goes along with that? So, but to give you an idea, I mean, we've done, in the last 2 years, we've done medical spaces that were $75 a square foot, and we've done them all the way up to $225 a square foot. So it just depends on the finishes and what's involved. Class A office space, for the most part, hovers around 75 to 100 a square foot for build out.
Vanilla shell or gray shell?
I'm sorry?
Vanilla shell or gray?
Usually it's a vanilla shell. Again, a lot of it depends on finishes and are we adding bathrooms or not. You know, that's the challenge because it gets a little bit more expensive than that. This is kind of a fun one. Well, I say it's fun. Everybody sees these car washes being built everywhere. We just finished our 4th, and we got about 5 more coming. Most of them are in Lee County, but it's kind of an interesting little market. And they look simple, but they're actually pretty complicated. A lot of it has to happen before you ever see the building going up. So, but those are generally running around $325 to $350 a square foot, again, depending on how fancy they are and how much site work we have to do. Site, as we all know, dirt's expensive, and bringing the site up to meet flood elevation is generally a pretty expensive proposition. So. Those guys that are selling the properties that are low and having the cost to bring in dirt is pretty extravagant right now, crazy. That's all I have. Does anybody have any questions for me? Chip?
Did the minimum wage increase, is that going to increase labor costs?
I'm sure it will eventually. We haven't seen or felt that yet. I'm sure, and I think that's over a period of time, but I would think that most of the tradesmen that we're dealing with are already above that $15 a square foot, or $15 an hour type, other than maybe some of the laborers.
How about the senior housing, like assisted living?
I don't have any expertise in that. I'm sorry, I don't do any assisted living, no. Do a lot of work in the towers, condos, common areas. Believe it or not, we're still doing quite a bit of IRMA work. They're just settling up on some of these larger insurance claims. So we've got a couple of towers that we're replacing windows and roofs and things like that. That's sort of another little niche that we kind of worked ourselves into. Yes, sir?
Any problem with getting labor and people that need to do projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge. Again, we rely on our relationships. Been doing it here for about 23 years now. So, but our subs have a hard time getting, it seems like the difficult trades for us today are plumbers. Believe it or not, it's really difficult to find, particularly on commercial. And a lot of times, and we put projects out to bid almost daily, and you would think that it'd be pretty easy to get bids, but if the plans aren't great, you know, and a lot of times they're not, if it's going to require a little bit more work for the subcontractor to put the pricing together, they just kind of push it aside. So we have to kind of coax them into it, bring them in, and actually kind of almost do their estimate for them in order to get the quotes, because our developers and our clients want 3 qualified bids. So it's a challenge for us, and that it's just more work, basically, for us. But where 15 years ago, or, well, I guess in the early 2000s, it was a little easier than it is now as far as getting people to bid work. So, anything else? Okay, thanks.
Next up is to talk about lending.
Want to ask me about that? I had been told interest rates was the topic. Yeah, I am Kristen Madden. I am a commercial lender for the last 20, I guess, just about exactly 20 years and 3 days, in Lee County and Collier County. Went to FGCU, did my MBA there, so banking, Southwest Florida, the whole time. But interest rates is the topic that I was asked to talk to you guys about, and I'm certainly willing to talk to you about the PPP too, because I was really involved in that this year. We saw right after COVID a drop in interest rates and a huge rush to refinance on existing properties, a pullback on purchases, of course. People need to know about the future, and things are very uncertain then. But the refinance was a no-brainer. We were very busy with that. We were stealing money from each other. The banks were at rock bottom rates. That lasted for a little bit, and then it had to stop. And people don't understand. They say, well, why are the commercial rates back up to 4%? And that's pretty much right around 4% where they've been since probably about May, June. And the reason for that is the smaller commercial loans, there isn't a secondary market for those loans. They are held on the bank's balance sheets, the small banks, even the larger banks. You can't bundle them up like the residential loans, the small non-jumbo loans, and hedge your risk with derivatives. We keep them. So we can only put so much of these. There were some that we did like in the low threes. And I'm talking 5-year fix for 3 years. We get measured on a lot of things in banking. We're regulated by the government, and they do come in and they look at our interest rate risk. How we're managing that part of the portfolio. Because the worst thing that can happen for a bank, if you've been around for a little while, is, we have the other side. It's nothing ever stays the same, right? So we'll go from right now, which seems we're in kind of a lull of low interest rates. It's going to be back up to where they were when I started underwriting for the first time 20 years ago. Our average underwriting rate that we used was 10%. That's what we put in all of our pro formas when we were doing any kind of underwriting. That's what I learned, was 10%. Think of 10% now, it's an unbelievable rate. But so, what goes up must come down, what goes down must go back up eventually. But anyways, back to the banks. So we're probably been around 4% now since through the summer. All the banks have. You can't take in much more of these really low rates because we do have depositors, and eventually they are going to start putting money, back into the CDs and things like that. So we can't be upside down on our portfolio interest rate wise. We are concerned about rates going up, and right around the election, there was some talk from our senior management about holding rates. We typically will hold a rate when a commitment letter for a commercial deal. You sign your commitment letter with me, and I'm locking you for 60 days. It's funny though, when the rates go down, you guys come right back. Hey, that rate, was 5%. They dropped to 4%. Yeah. So we always, we appease you because we don't want to lose the deal to the other bank. But when they start going up, we're probably not going to be able to lock. You're not going to see banks. That might be a 30-day commitment on the rate. When things start to move. And things are going to start to move. There's some interesting things that are going on this year. There's a lot of people that aren't doing well, we know. You hear that in the news all the time. But there are a lot of people that are doing pretty well. And there's a lot of cash on the sidelines. And the biggest word I've heard is there's going to be a cash bomb next year or a growth bomb next year. Our savings rate hit almost 35% in April. That's a lot of people like my parents who are in their early 70s and have to take minimum distribution. They're of age where they're retired and they could right now be on a cruise. They could have gone to their 50th anniversary trip to the Amalfi Coast in May in a normal year. These people in this demographic, the newly, older baby boomer, newly retired, they have saved a lot of money. They saved their whole lives. And now they've just had this whole year where they haven't been able to do anything. They haven't been able to go out to dinner. They haven't been able to go on any trips. So they're saving a lot of money. They're up into the trillions of money sitting. And they have to start taking money out of their retirement because of minimum distribution. So they've got money. They've got pent-up demand. We're going to start seeing when we have a vaccine. I'm already hearing it from my relatives who are mostly in Massachusetts. There's hope with this vaccine. They're talking about maybe coming to see me next year. So maybe. But that vaccine, you're already seeing it, in the financial markets. That is going to probably light this gas. And I think you're going to see things starting to, we could start seeing inflation again. We also have a lot of deficit spending in the government. It's going to be more of that probably. They're saying, well, interest rates are real low, so we can afford to borrow in tax later. That's a whole other topic for an economist, not a banker. But in any event, what does happen, we have to know a little bit about economics, is if we start having really high growth, we start having inflation, we're going to start having higher interest rates. Kind of all works together that way. And we're going to see that for a while before we would see any kind of pullback. So at some point next year, you're going to see a lot of pent-up demand, a lot of the supply chain you were talking about. There's people that want to buy new cars. There's no new cars coming off the assembly line. Same price to buy a used car as to buy a new car. My friend owns a couple dealerships up in Minneapolis and told me that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this whole sector that no one's really talking about. They're scared to death. They've been home. They haven't left. And they're starting to get excited because they might be able to leave. And when they leave, they're going to have a lot of money. And that'll probably help everybody. I mean, the residential, the commercial, and everything. But interest rates are probably going to start going up sometime next year. If I knew when, we could all go buy some derivatives and make a whole bunch of money, but I don't, so we can't. As far as PPP, some people asked some questions about that. We are getting in applications pretty regularly for forgiveness, and it's pretty simple, especially $50,000 and under the people that got those loans. The SBA really slimmed down the application. It's basically a signature and their backup information. They have to give us the payroll data that they spent and the utility and their rent or their mortgage payments. But we were having to do some math on some of the larger ones and double check their numbers. But we send them in to the SBA, and they usually come back with a matter of weeks. The SBA pays us off. So it's sad because we're going to lose those outstandings we got real fast earlier this year. But we don't want all these little loans kicking around either that are unsecured and not guaranteed. And so it's good that they're getting paid off pretty quickly. And that program, I know there's talk about another round of PPP, but I don't think we're going to hear anything more about that until next year, early next year. But any questions about any of the? I feel like I just babbled for 10 minutes. Yeah.
Next round of PPP, is it going to go maybe the same, or what are they going to do? Who's going to be eligible, I guess, next round?
I don't know. I'm not a politician, but I can't tell you. With Charlotte State Bank, I was working on applications for people, predominantly small business people out of Charlotte County. We saw real quick that, well, first of all, we only took our customers that bank with us, and we saw real quick that it was coming in fast. And there's 3 lenders, and we were taking them as quick as we can. It was back in April. It was pretty crazy. So we cut ours off. A lot of the larger banks, it was really sad because they couldn't take care of this. Most of my loans, I did the math. My average loan size was like $80,000. A lot of little loans. And that was with just a few big ones that I didn't know we had a couple pretty big companies up in Charlotte County, but a lot of, mom and pops. Fun to talk to. Fun when I call them right now, because we do call them when we get the SBA payoff. It's like my favorite thing to do right now is to call and say, guess what? Your loan's gone. They paid us off. It's a fun thing to do this time of the year, and they're usually pretty happy about it. But as far as who, like you, I hope that it's going to be targeted towards the people that really need it. Some not just, there were businesses that didn't really need it. They were fine. 20% suffer in a recession typically, over the century if you go through it. Typically the bottom 20% drop out. And above, they kind of do okay, you know. So a lot of people that did okay still got the money. And you know, I'm sure that you know, there was a need. Of course, everyone was scared. Nobody knew what to do. Now we kind of know what to do. So it'll be interesting to see how they roll that up. But the SBA didn't know. They didn't know what they were doing. They were changing the rules so fast that they weren't able to go back and change what complete contradiction they had on their website from early on. It was, you could read it on page 1, it said this, and on page 2 later it said that. And it was like you just had to go with the latest information, and then it was kind of like buyer beware, because we would tell people as a banker, we don't know anything else that you can see on the website. That's all the information we're getting. So I don't really have any inside scoop on that. Anything else?
Chip Olson from RE1 Advisor, and he's going to talk a little bit about foreclosures.
Can everybody hear me okay? So I'm Chip Olson. I do real estate consulting. Every Monday morning, I have a staff meeting at 9 o'clock. At 10 o'clock, I have a conference call with investment bankers from Texas. At 11 o'clock, I have a conference call with what's happening in the foreclosure market in Florida. By noon, I'm usually depressed. So I'm going to give you the good and the bad and the ugly. The good is, and this is my opinion, COVID is probably the best thing that ever happened to Collier County because it's created a bubble. And people around the country, right now New York is seeing a 10-year low in rents. They can't fill things up. They're giving $1,200 credits to move into an apartment in downtown Manhattan. That tells me a lot, because 2 years ago, my accountant's son is paying $1,400 for a 600 square foot bedroom, and he shares with 3 people. So each of them are coughing up, and just to get to, you know, his job at the hotel. I said, well, why is he doing it? He loves New York, so enough said. So Monday morning, the investment bankers, they get on the phone and we start talking about interest rates and what's going to happen. And their prediction is in 2025, tax rates are going to go to 60%. Capital gains is going to go to 40%. And I kind of argued with them a little bit on one day, and they came up with this whole theory that we've got to pay for all this PPP money. We've got to pay for all this stuff that it's happening right now, and the government programs that are coming in place. And this is the first time it was introduced to me was even way before the election, and they said it doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat. We have to pay for this stuff somehow. So we have, and I was telling my daughter before the election, I said, we've got to, someday we're going to have to step up to the plate. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be here by 2025. So with that said, the good is, you know, we're in a great place. People are moving here from places that we've never seen before. Atlanta, Miami, Chicago. Well, we've always had Chicago, but what shocked me was people from Atlanta were coming here, trying to get out of the city, such. We go to the list pendants, and I get a report for all the counties around Orlando, all the counties around Tampa, and then all the way down the coast. Orlando right now has double what the cities have in foreclosures for single-family homes. It's a tourist area. I called an investment banker in Las Vegas, and I asked him what was going on, and he said it's the same thing here. We're tourist-based, and without tourists, we're dead. Are we going to see a trickle-down effect of that? I don't know. But you have some businesses through the Midwest that we've always depended on. We're our backbone. You know, mom and dad sell the hardware store for $1 million. They moved to Naples because it's the place they've always wanted to be. Will they still have that $1 million? I'm not sure. Baby boomers, which are myself, you know, we're a selfish group, so we're spending the money that we're going to leave for our kids now. So, you know, that's a good thing for us. So from a standpoint of being in a Naples tourist town where everybody wants to be. The list pendants filed in Collier County was almost nothing. So if you're looking for short sales, there's a few out there. If you're looking for foreclosures, I wouldn't waste your time. In 2010, when we were dealing, Robbie and I were working together, we were dealing with a lot of funds. They were buying bad debt and bad loans at 60 cents on the dollar. Talking to a fund yesterday, and he said, if I can find something for 90 cents on the dollar, I buy it without even looking at it. So things are trading at par or par plus, just because there's so much money floating out there waiting for the recession to come. Will it come? I think it will, because we have to pay for the sins of the past. When it happens, some people are telling me the end of 2021, some are saying it's 2022, 2023. Who knows? You know, when COVID started, I thought the stock market was going to crash. I bought a bunch of stuff and then it crashed again. And so I'm still waiting for it to come back. But who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. But as such, short, it's brief, it's unprepared. But if anybody has any questions with the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'll gladly try to answer them. Yes, sir.
5-year prediction about the taxes for investments and stuff. Did they address our income tax, I mean, on regular earnings?
Yeah, this is going to go to 6.
What did they say about that?
They just said they have to pay for the things that we have, and the tax rates, the maximum tax rate is going to go to 60%. If you make over $250,000 a year, you're going to be paying 60 points. So, yeah.
Talk about the forbearance situation. When is all this going to come to a head?
Okay, first quarter, according to the president of TD America and Wells Fargo, I've been on conference calls with both of them, they are going to start the foreclosure process on their bad loans starting January 1 of this next year. So you're going to start seeing, we're geared up. We started in September contacting all these people. We have weekly calls with them and taking them out to lunch and golf and all sorts of stuff with our team. And every bank that I've talked to, Jeff, they're saying first quarter, you know. We've got our game in place from the corrections of the last recession, but we're starting to fall out of balance and we can't do that again. Maybe we'll see another round of bank mergers, who knows?
So does that mean the FDIC is kind of lightening up on the banks,
Oh, they're watching them closer.
but they're letting them go through the next quarter?
Yeah, yeah. I think with the COVID thing, I think everybody got a free pass. So, such.
Inheritance tax, you said they're good at what?
Well, inheritance tax, that's a whole nother thing. You might see that drop down to from 20 million for a couple to 10. And, but there's so many loopholes in that. And I again, and I apologize, but I sit with a bunch of attorneys that do estate planning and trying to gobble up any real estate work I can. You know, I get on my knees and beg. But they're telling me that there's so many loopholes in that they can get around it. Hey, it's a banker. Anyways, yeah, I'm not too worried about the inheritance tax thing, just because you can, you know, if you're smart and you do things about it, you can. Yeah, yeah. You know, you yep. But if you've got a basis in a property, your basis is low, it might be worth more. You can fudge around that when you give it to your kids and whatever. So, any questions? Otherwise, I'll dance off of here. So, yeah, I hung up on them. If they call me at this night, it's probably they're looking for money. So.